Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about peel paragraphs. Point, example, explain, link. There are on different online sources, different ways of making up your peel paragraph, but currently this is the version that we are using. So point, example, explain, link. And the reason that we utilize this structure for formulating paragraphs in our written work is to help add depth to our writing. So we're not just merely describing what we did, but we're also exploring how we did it and why we did it. So what the overall impact was. And that's really important in performing arts, especially where a lot of the time we're talking about our work in the rehearsal room and our work on stage or in performances. And actually what we need to be able to do is link together all of that theoretical understanding that we have from the workshops and the lessons that we engage with and the research that we do along the way. So this is one way of adding depth to our writing, and I'm just going to take you through that now. So the first element of our peel paragraph is to make our point. So does what it says on the tin. You are going to state your point or identify the key points that you're going to be talking about in that paragraph. The key thing here is to remember to use subject-specific terminology. So anything that's been written on the class boards, any glossaries that you have, make sure that you are using the correct terminology because it shows a clear understanding of what it is that you're doing in practice theoretically. So a simple example of this is a strength this week was my use of soundscape in my drama lesson. Once we've opened our paragraph and we've made our point, we're then going to go to the example. And here you're going to kind of expand on the how you did the thing that you said you're going to be talking about. You want to imagine that the reader, which is either the person marking the work or the examiner, was not in the room with you when you were doing that practical work. So it's really important to expand and give the reader a bit of descriptive detail about what you were doing and try and add as much of that in as possible so you can really build a picture in their mind of what it was like in that rehearsal space or during that show. So simple, again, example might be, I selected two noises to represent an office environment. These were a phone ringing and tapping on a keyboard. I made these noises using my voice and props. Once we've given our specific example, we're then going to go on to explain a little bit about it. Now, you might start with why it was important, or you might define the subject-specific terminology that you're talking about. The nice thing here is that you're able then to just showcase to the marker or the examiner that you actually understand what it is that you're talking about and why you might select or utilise that particular technique in your work. Why was it there? What was it aiming to achieve? So here in our example, a soundscape is a mix of sounds and noises actors make on stage to communicate a sense of atmosphere or environment. So I've given my definition, so that's my understanding of it. I'm then going to go on and say we wanted to communicate the sense that the scene was set in a busy office environment. So I'm justifying why we utilised that technique. So I've made my point, I've given an example and I've explained it. Now this is the section, the linking section, that is probably the hardest bit to do, and a lot of my students struggle with this. There are three things that you can think about when you are trying to make the link at the end of your peel paragraph. And the overarching idea is that you're talking about the impact that that thing had. And in performing arts, you could either link it back to the research you originally conducted. So it might have been at the beginning of the lesson or the workshop, or it might have been right at the beginning of a project. What was the research that sparked the idea that you were going to use this thing in your practical work? Linking it back and talking about whether you achieved those aims or how it's increased your understanding is a really great way of linking your research to your practical work. Another way that you could link is thinking about the audience. So we did mention the audience in our explaining paragraph, but we might go on to talk a little bit more about the impact we wanted that particular technique to have on the audience, the communication of meaning behind what we were doing and whether that was effective or not. And finally, we might also link back to our own performance ability. So we might talk about what we can do now that we couldn't do before, the impact that learning that technique and performing that technique has had on us as an actor, a singer, a dancer, whatever it happens to be that you're talking about. Another great tip for the link is to add in some quotes. So this is joining things together. Now, in the example that I've got on the screen, I've got a quote from some research, but you could quite easily use peer feedback or your teacher's feedback, director's feedback, audience feedback. You could use those things as quotes as well. Just remember to make sure that anything that is somebody else's voice is put in quotation marks. So the example we have here is dramasource.com states, the group should bear in mind contrasting and complementary sounds and try and be aware of natural peaks and troughs in the piece. I think our group effectively communicated the office environment through a variety of sounds. However, the energy was the same throughout. So next time we may want to explore how to change the dynamics in our soundscape to take the audience on a journey in terms of atmosphere. So there we've used a quote to kind of link back to our research and analyse how well what we did worked overall or didn't work overall. We've also set ourselves a goal for next time, and in an ideal world we'd want to expand that goal as well and say what you might do differently next time. And that leads into the idea of goal setting and SMART targets, which is the subject of another video. So overall, our Peel paragraph now looks really substantial. We've got some great stuff in there, some evaluative stuff, we've got some context understanding, we've pulled in a little bit of our research, and we've started evaluating as well. So a strength this week was my use of soundscape in our drama lesson. I selected 2 noises to represent an office environment. These were a phone ringing and tapping on a keyboard. I made these noises using my voice and props. A soundscape is a mix of sounds and noises actors make on stage to communicate a sense of atmosphere or environment. We wanted to communicate the sense that the scene was set in a busy office environment. Dramasource.com states that the group should bear in mind contrasting and complementary sounds to try and be aware of natural peaks and troughs in the piece. I think our group effectively communicated the office environment through a variety of sounds. However, the energy was the same throughout. So next time we may want to explore how to change the dynamics in our soundscape to take the audience on a journey in terms of atmosphere. And now we've added a lot of depth. Now there are sections within that we could expand further. I might say, if I'm marking it, but what props did you use? And how did you use your voice? What was the tone like? What was the pitch like? So there are ways that we can expand even what we've done here to add more depth and more sophistication to our writing. But that is the overall thing we're looking for. So when we go from our point to our example, we explain and we link. The example and the explain could be switched around. That's absolutely fine, as long as you've got both in there. One thing I would say about adding quotes is make sure that, especially if it's from your research, that at the bottom of your work you are referencing your sources. Now, I like to use the Harvard referencing format, and there is a great website called mybib.com that will support you doing that really, really simply. There are others available as well, but just make sure that you're citing those sources correctly. You're putting anything that's not your voice in inverted commas, in quotation marks, and you're adding that bibliography to the bottom. Good luck.